Saudade. Someone you love is gone, or a time is gone, or a place has changed past the point of return, and there's an ache in it that isn't quite grief and isn't quite nostalgia and isn't quite longing, but contains all three and something more underneath them. Something warm and devastating at the same time. The Portuguese call this saudade. It has no direct English translation. The word has been central to Portuguese culture for centuries and is embedded in fado, the country's national music tradition. It hits when someone you love dies and you reach for the phone before remembering, when a place you grew up in becomes unrecognizable, when a relationship ends and the love has nowhere to go. What makes saudade different from ordinary missing someone is the presence of love inside the loss. It isn't empty grief. It's grief that still contains the thing that caused it. The love is still running. The object of the love is gone. And saudade is the name for that specific, sustained ache of love with nowhere to land. Brazil designated January 30th as the official day of saudade. It is treated not as a negative emotion, but as evidence of deep feeling. A life without saudade, in Portuguese culture, is a life without having loved anything worth missing. Toska. Something is wrong. Not specifically, not in a way you can point to. A heaviness. A longing that doesn't have an object. A dull ache in the background with nothing to attach it to. You look for the source and find nothing. The feeling continues anyway. The Russians call this Toska. Vladimir Nabokov once wrote that no single English word could render it, describing it as a sensation of great spiritual anguish, often without cause, a longing with nothing to long for, a vague restlessness, a dull ache of the soul. It hits on gray winter days, in the gap between one chapter of life and the next, sometimes simply in the quiet of an ordinary evening. What makes Toska different from depression is the wistful quality. There's a yearning in it rather than a flatness. And what makes it different from nostalgia is the absence of a specific object. Nostalgia misses something in particular. Toska just misses. Russian literature, Chekhov, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, returns to this feeling repeatedly because it is considered native to the Russian emotional landscape, not pathological, just part of what it feels like to be alive and paying attention. Forelsket. You've had maybe 3 real conversations with this person. You don't know their history, their habits, or what they're like when things go wrong, and you can't stop thinking about them. There's a giddiness in it that you know is out of proportion to how little you actually know. And you don't care, because for now it feels like something is beginning, and that feeling is its own thing entirely. The Norwegians call this Forelsket, the overwhelming, euphoric feeling of falling in love, specifically that early period before reality has had a chance to arrive. It hits in the first weeks of something new, in the space between enough conversations to care and enough time to see clearly. What makes it different from love is the incompleteness of the information. Forelsket is partly about the person and partly about the possibility of the person. It's the feeling of a door having opened before you've walked through it. Psychologists have documented the neurochemical reality of this state. Elevated dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin activity measurably similar to the early stages of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Which doesn't make it less real. It just explains why it's so hard to think about anything else. Yaghan. Someone you love is in the room. It might be a completely ordinary moment. They're sitting across from you, or asleep nearby, or talking about something unremarkable. And a thought arrives, uninvited and quiet. What would it be like without this person? And the thought is so unbearable that you don't finish it. In Arabic, there is an expression for this, Ya Berni. It translates literally as, may you bury me, meaning I hope I die before you because I cannot imagine surviving your absence. It's said to people you love most, not as something dark, but as the most honest expression of how much someone means. It hits most in quiet, ordinary moments with the people closest to you. Not in crisis, but in the middle of nothing special, which is exactly when the weight of how much you'd lose becomes briefly, clearly visible. English has love, which is enormous and covers everything. Ya Berni is more specific. It holds the grief already folded inside the love. The awareness that this person is temporary sitting right inside the feeling of how much they matter. Arabic looked at that specific experience and gave it a name. English never got around to it. Mamihlapinatapai. You're with someone, a friend, a new acquaintance, someone you've just met. The conversation has arrived somewhere real and both of you sense it. Something could be said. Maybe something needs to be addressed. Maybe one of you wants to suggest something. Neither speaks. You both look at each other, and in that look is the full knowledge that you both know, and neither of you is going to be the one to say it first. This is called mamihlapinatapai. It comes from the Yaghan language of Tierra del Fuego in South America, and the Guinness Book of World Records has listed it as the most succinct word in existence. It describes a look shared between two people who both want to initiate something but are both reluctant to make the first move. It hits in friendships on the edge of becoming something more honest, in conversations that have arrived somewhere neither person is quite ready to name, in rooms where something true is hovering just above the surface. What makes it remarkable is its precision. English needs an entire sentence to describe what this single word holds: the look, the mutual awareness, the shared reluctance, the standoff that both people are simultaneously losing and maintaining. Whole relationships have turned on this moment. Sehnsucht. The world is often beautiful, and still, sometimes, it doesn't quite feel like home. Like you're moving through something on your way to somewhere else, without being able to identify where that somewhere else is. A longing for a place or a state of being that you can't locate and may not exist. The Germans call this sehnsucht, an intense longing or craving, often for something abstract or unattainable. C.S. Lewis wrote about it his whole life, calling it an inconsolable longing for something that cannot be named or found in the ordinary world. It hits in moments of unexpected beauty, a piece of music, a landscape, the quality of light on a particular afternoon. Something that almost gets there and then doesn't. Psychologists at the University of Virginia have actually studied sehnsucht empirically, describing it as a life-longings emotion, distinct from ordinary desire in that the thing being longed for cannot be obtained. What makes it different from sadness is that it's oriented forward and upward, towards something, even if that something has no address. Lewis believed it was pointing at something real. Psychologists describe it as an adaptive emotion that helps people maintain meaning in the face of an imperfect life. Either way, the feeling is real, and most people who feel it their whole lives. Mono no aware. The cherry blossoms are at their peak, or the light on a late afternoon in autumn is doing something specific, or you're watching a moment that is clearly and visibly passing, a child growing, a gathering ending, a season turning, and you feel it. Not just the beauty of the thing, the beauty and the loss of it at the same time, a tenderness that is partly joy and partly grief and cannot be separated into either. The Japanese call this mono no aware. Translated loosely as the pathos of things, the bittersweet awareness of impermanence. It has been central to Japanese art, literature, and philosophy since the Heian period, over 1,000 years ago. It hits when something beautiful is also clearly temporary, when you're in something good and can feel it passing at the same time. The Japanese philosopher Motori Norinaga described it as the feeling that arises when you truly understand the transient nature of things, not just know it intellectually, but feel it in the presence of beauty. What makes mono no aware different from ordinary sadness is the acceptance inside it. It isn't fighting the impermanence, it's feeling the beauty more deeply because of it. The cherry blossoms are celebrated in Japan not despite how quickly they fall, because of it. Fernweh. You're sitting at your desk or going through your ordinary week and something pulls at you. Not toward home, away from it, toward somewhere you've never been, or somewhere distant and barely imagined. A coast, a mountain range, a city in a country you've only seen in photographs. The feeling has an ache in it, a specific restlessness that isn't resolved by activity, just a pull toward elsewhere. The Germans call this Fernweh, literally translated as far sickness, the opposite of homesickness. Where homesickness longs for the familiar, Fernweh longs for the completely unknown. It hits on slow weekday afternoons, when a photograph of somewhere far away stops you mid-scroll, when you hear someone describe a place and something in you responds to it before you've made any decision about why. What makes Fernweh different from ordinary wanderlust is the quality of longing. Wanderlust is a desire. Fernweh is closer to an ache, something that sits in the chest the way homesickness does, except directed outward rather than backward. The German nobleman who first used the word in 1835 wrote that he never suffered from homesickness, only from its opposite, an urge not to return, but to go. To be somewhere unknown, among people who don't know him, in a place that has no record of who he was before he arrived. Meraki. You're doing something, cooking a meal, building something with your hands, writing, making something, and you're not just completing a task, you're putting something of yourself into it. The care you're taking is beyond what the outcome requires. The attention is beyond what anyone watching would notice. Something of you is going into the thing, and you can feel that. The Greeks call this Meraki, doing something with soul, creativity, and love, leaving a piece of yourself in what you are making. It hits most when the thing you're making matters to you more than it might matter to anyone else. A meal cooked for someone you love. A letter written when a text would have been enough. Work done at a level of care that goes past what was asked. What makes Meraki different from simply working hard is the transfer quality. Something of the maker goes into the thing made. The Greek grandmother who cooks with Meraki puts something into the food that a recipe cannot account for. The craftsman who works with Meraki leaves something in the object that survives the making of it. It's the difference between producing something and leaving something behind. And most people know when they're doing it, which one it is. Every language on Earth developed to describe the world its speakers lived in. The emotions they return to often enough to need a word for. Which means every untranslatable word is also a window, not just into a language, into what that culture noticed, what it valued, what it decided was worth the effort of naming. The feelings in this video aren't rare. Almost everyone has felt most of them. The difference is simply that some languages looked at those feelings and decided they deserved a word. And once something has a word, it becomes easier to recognize when it arrives. Easier to say to someone else, I know what that is. I've felt it too. That is what language does at its best. Not just communicate,